Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Mr. Dan Nimmer on the piano. George Delancey on the bass. Ali Jackson on the drums. Walter Blanding on the tenor and soprano saxophone. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning with you. Thank you so much for your attendance and for your initial enthusiasm. I hope that we can continue that. With the political season upon us, every issue in national life will be up for debate and consideration. We're going to hear about gun control, immigration, education, jobs, housing, discrimination, unions, finances, regulations, of course, corruption and scandal. But the one thing that will not be mentioned even in passing, we can all be absolutely sure, will be culture and the arts. You can depend on that. That's something you can believe in. And that is because we're in the midst of a cultural bubonic plague. It's much like the Europeans of the 14th century who mistakenly looked everywhere for a cause. See, they're still looking. They looked for vampires as a punishment from God. They looked everywhere also for a cure, from superstitious remedies like purges and bleeding to exile and isolation. And they found everything they were looking for except the source: rats. In the last 50 years, we've looked everywhere to correct the decline in the quality of our national life, except the most obvious place: the arts as representative of our culture. You know that we all need incessant and painless reiterations of our national story to strengthen and fortify the very fibers of our consciousness and lead us always upward to intelligent and heroic democratic action. Instead, the substance of our collective narrative is constantly simplified and vulgarized by an increasingly unhinged entertainment industry that willfully confuses pornography with artistic risk and commercial success with quality. And there was a time that there were sacred cows, but now no group is beyond exploitation, even preteen kids. Every one of us is reduced to a target market for some media product. And what we are in need of now is a serious cultural revolution. It could be that we're too fat on the swell of what's being served to actually push for the change that we need. But this is the sector that we need to improve our financial systems and our political systems. When will it occur to us that there's much in American culture that can teach, unify, and heal us? And when will we realize that ultimately the arts as representative of our cultural solutions have provided a time-tested blueprint of how to face the ever-changing world with class, creativity, confidence, and even with competence? You see, before we sang, we spoke. Before we danced, we walked. Before we wrote, we told stories. And before we told stories, we lived. Those songs, dances, writings allow us to speak to one another across generations. They gave us an understanding of our commonality long before the DNA told us that we are all part of each other in a glorious procession. At any point on the timeline of human history, there are tales to be told. Tales of love and loss, of glory and shame, of profundity and even profound stupidity. Tales that deserve retelling, embellishing, and if need be, inventing from whole cloth. This is our story. This is our song. If well sung, it tells us exactly who we are and where we belong. And these people were all kinds of people. They came from everywhere. Some of them lived in cities and some lived on farms. Some were educated, ignorant, religious, sacrilegious, enslaved, some not. But even the unenslaved were oppressed, and they all wanted to be free. and the frontier represented freedom. They sang songs and they told stories, and what was in those stories was their exploits. It was their humor and their aspirations. And some people sang and spoke with such depth that just listening and watching took you to the frontier of your own soul. It picked you up. It made you more alive. Now, they weren't playing tenor saxophones back then. But this liberty was not free. Patrick Henry famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And many were served death in order to afford others a seat at the table of liberty. Suddenly, all types of people appeared together. Geniuses, a thing never seen again. Virginian Thomas Jefferson, high-minded New Yorker Alexander Hamilton, Bostonian turned Philadelphian Ben Franklin in the twilight of his brilliance, the living embodiment of down-home sophistication. Men arguing with epic intensity over money and trade and the rights of states, money and taxes and political power, and money and slavery, and money and religion, and just about everything, and money you knew or had ever heard of, and money. Well, there was a lot of knowledge in that group. There was a lot of memory and all that comes with knowledge and memory. Pride, arrogance, stubbornness. But don't you let those wigs fool you. These men possessed a timeless wisdom and a willingness to act together. You see, somewhere along the way they realized that their freedom was linked to other people's freedom. And with the art of the pen, they crafted the most flexible and poetic political document in history. A sterling example of group improvisation on the grand human theme. How can I be me without keeping you from being you? Have mercy. I see you shaking your head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody from a family knows about that. Have mercy. All that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they largely taught us how to negotiate our differences. The same way a good dance band adjusts to find the right tempo for each different room of dancers. To be effective, our founding fathers had to create a living document that could find the right tempo across the ages. And when the ink dried on the last signature, it was the Constitution that told us how to be. But it was left to the American arts to tell us who to be. And the who almost always determines the how. And that's why this Constitution could be amended. Oh yes, our freedom had a fine political chassis, but it was in need of a cultural engine. This new American way needed homegrown arts to make us into one people, to teach us who we are. We still need it, and it's still revolutionary. The freedom to choose the life of your dreaming, to put yourself in the situation you wanted to be in or should be in. Man, let me tell y'all, this liberty was some serious stuff. Because once you turn freedom loose, there's no telling where it might go. Well, it showed up suddenly in Minton's Playhouse in 1940s Harlem. Geniuses all together. A thing never seen again. Charlie Yardbird Parker from Kansas City, the living embodiment of down-home sophistication. John Dizzy Gillespie from Cheraw, South Carolina, full of rhythmic fire and intellectual curiosity. Thelonious Monk from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, mathematician of music and master of thematic improvisation. Right there, all kinds of knowledge and memory and all of the self-absorption that comes with those attributes. These men were furiously discussing and dissecting American fundamentals through a red-hot style called bebop. And somewhere along the way, they answered questions about individual freedoms and collective responsibilities in the language of swing. When all was said and done, they did nothing less than create the new school of American virtuosity. And it rose right up from the bowels of our caste system to demonstrate with sheer brilliance that who a person is always more definitive than what a person is. Dizzy, and Monk, creating a community of people in the service of American objectives detailed by Jefferson, Madison, and Adams more than 150 years earlier. The urgency and speed of their music was also a declaration of independence. It exclaimed, "Now is the time."